Setting off a firecracker, letting your girlfriend stay over without registering it, naming your kid with a number instead of letters. In most countries, nobody would blink twice at any of that. In Vietnam, all three of them can technically get you in trouble with the law. That's just 3 out of 10 of the strangest laws I'm about to show you today. I'm Vietnamese, and I'm going to explain why these laws, which sound completely absurd, actually have a reason behind them. Before we get into the list, let's be clear. Weird doesn't mean pointless. Most of the laws on this list have a pretty solid reason behind them. It's just that the reason isn't always obvious to outsiders, and sometimes not even to the people living here. One more thing worth repeating from previous videos. Regulations can change over time and vary by location. This video is a cultural perspective, not legal advice. If you're planning to live or work in Vietnam long-term, always double-check the most current information yourself. 1. Setting off personal fireworks is illegal, even on New Year's Eve. In a lot of countries, personal fireworks are just a normal part of the holidays. In Vietnam, individuals setting off explosive firecrackers is still banned, and for a long time, only state-licensed organizations were allowed to put on fireworks displays for major holidays. That said, the rules have loosened recently. Certain non-explosive fireworks, the kind that only create a light effect, no bang, are now allowed for personal use on specific occasions, though the line between allowed and not allowed is still pretty easy to get wrong. This comes from a very practical reason. Homemade firecrackers used to cause countless serious accidents before the ban was put in place. But for a lot of travelers coming from countries where personal fireworks are just a given, this is usually the most surprising thing they learn. New Year's Eve in Vietnam is a lot quieter than they'd expect, at least at the individual level. Here's something kind of funny. Plenty of Vietnamese people grew up with vivid memories of firecrackers popping on New Year's Eve, from old movies and songs, despite never having actually lit one themselves. 2. Letting someone sleep over, even your partner, technically requires reporting it to local authorities. This is probably the thing that surprises foreigners living in Vietnam the most. Under residency regulations, if someone who isn't registered at your address stays overnight, a friend, a partner, even a relative, the homeowner is technically supposed to report their temporary stay to the local police, usually through an app or in person. This is a general residency rule that applies to any overnight stay, not some law specifically targeting personal relationships. In practice, this rule is mostly enforced strictly with foreigners, especially at hotels, where guest registration is mandatory. While between Vietnamese people themselves, almost nobody actually follows this process every time a friend crashes at their place. I once had to explain this to a foreign friend renting an apartment in Vietnam. They couldn't believe that, technically, their girlfriend staying over for a few nights was supposed to be reported to the local ward office. 3. Birth certificate names must be written in Vietnamese with diacritics, no numbers or foreign characters. In some countries, parents can name their kid a number, a symbol, or even a brand name. In Vietnam, birth certificates require the name to be written in Vietnamese with proper diacritical marks. No numbers, no plain Latin characters, no special symbols allowed. This sometimes creates a bit of an awkward situation for families with foreign backgrounds. They want to give their child an international-sounding name, but still have to Vietnamize the spelling on official documents to make it valid. 4. Dogs in public must be muzzled and kept on a leash. Under pet management regulations, dogs and cats in public spaces are required to be muzzled and leashed, with someone holding the leash. This rule exists to ensure safety, especially after a number of incidents involving stray or unleashed dogs causing accidents or biting people that made headlines. But if you walk through pretty much any park in Vietnam, you'll see most pet dogs running around freely. No muzzle, no leash. Owners usually only follow this rule when there's an inspection happening. Honestly, I think this is a law that 90% of dog owners in Vietnam are fully aware of, and 90% of them choose to quietly ignore it until they spot a local police officer walking through the park. 5. Large-scale drug trafficking carries a maximum penalty of death. This is one of the weird laws in the sense that it's shocking rather than funny. Vietnam has one of the strictest legal frameworks in the world when it comes to drug offenses. For trafficking or transporting quantities above a certain threshold, defined in the penal code, the maximum sentence can be the death penalty. This isn't the sentence applied to every drug-related offense, but reserved for the most serious cases that cross that specific legal threshold. For tourists coming from countries with far more lenient drug laws, this is something absolutely critical to know. There's no "I didn't know the law" exception for foreigners here. 6. Foreigners cannot hold land ownership rights. Under current land regulations, foreigners are not permitted to hold land use rights in Vietnam. Foreigners can only own housing tied to certain specific types of real estate, like condominium units, under their own set of conditions and limitations, not land ownership in the same way Vietnamese citizens can. This means a lot of foreigners looking to buy property in Vietnam have to carefully research legal forms of ownership, or opt to hold it through a Vietnamese spouse, a fairly common workaround, though one that carries its own legal risks if not researched properly. Because this is a major financial decision, and the regulations can get fairly complicated depending on the specific situation, if you're seriously considering buying property in Vietnam, consult a real estate lawyer before any transaction. Don't just rely on this video. What's interesting is that this rule isn't there to make things difficult. It exists in quite a few other Asian countries with the same logic. Land is treated as a national resource to be protected, not a commodity to be freely bought and sold across borders like a phone or a car. 7. Releasing sky lanterns near airports is strictly prohibited. Sky lanterns, Kongming lanterns, look harmless and romantic, but if released near an airport or a flight path, they can pose a serious danger to aircraft taking off or landing. That's why aviation safety regulations tightly control this activity near airport zones. The problem is, the boundary of near an airport isn't always obvious to the average person, which has led to plenty of festival lantern releases sparking controversy, violations committed by people who had no idea they were breaking any rule at all. 8. Motorbike license age and type are regulated in very specific detail based on engine size. Unlike a lot of countries that have just one general motorbike license, Vietnam splits things up pretty precisely. There's a separate age threshold and license type for bikes under 50cc, and a different one for anything above 50cc, each with its own licensing requirements. This is why you'll see so many high school students riding electric bikes or sub-50cc motorbikes to school. Not because the law is loose, but because this category of bike has a lower minimum age requirement than larger displacement motorbikes. 9. Used imported cars are restricted by a maximum age limit. Vietnam has regulations capping the maximum age of used cars allowed to be imported, aimed at preventing the country from becoming a dumping ground for outdated or less safe vehicles from abroad. This makes the used car import market in Vietnam pretty distinct compared to a lot of neighboring countries, and it's also part of the reason car prices, both new and used, tend to run noticeably higher here than the regional average. 10. Burning ceremonial paper offerings is restricted at certain temples, pagodas, and heritage sites. The tradition of burning vang ma, ceremonial paper money, and paper effigies to honor ancestors is a long-standing part of Vietnamese spiritual culture. But at certain temples, pagodas, and heritage sites, especially wooden structures with high historical value, this practice is being restricted or banned outright due to fire risk, following a number of unfortunate fires that have occurred over the years. This is one of the clearest examples of how a weird law isn't necessarily pointless. Sometimes it's actively trying to protect the very heritage that the tradition belongs to. So what connects all 10 of these strange laws? Almost all of them trace back to a real event, a hard lesson, or a real risk from the past. Firecrackers causing fires, lanterns endangering aviation, dogs biting people, ceremonial paper burning down heritage sites. Weird doesn't mean meaningless. It just means the context behind the law isn't obvious if you didn't grow up here. If you ask me which law on this list I actually think makes the most sense, I'll tell you straight up. The one about ceremonial paper at heritage sites. Not because I don't respect the tradition, but because I once stood and watched part of a centuries-old pagoda burn because of a small fire that got out of control. Some traditions are worth keeping even more once we learn to adjust them a little. And maybe that's the biggest lesson from this whole series on Vietnamese law. Legislation, anywhere in the world, doesn't come out of nowhere. It's always a trace left behind by something that actually happened, an accident, a loss, a hard lesson a society doesn't want to repeat. This is just 10 out of many fascinating laws I could tell you about in Vietnam. If this video surprised you, wait for the next one, where I'll walk you through every etiquette rule and tip you need to know in 10 minutes so you don't come across as rude the first time you visit a Vietnamese home. Subscribe, and I'll take you deeper into the real Vietnam, not the version you'd read in a book.